Okay, so you're just scrolling through Reddit, maybe looking for some camping tips or something, and you find this wilderness survival subreddit,
Oh, yeah.
and all of a sudden you're bombarded with all this information about like purifying radioactive water and what to do if you're in a plane crash and like how to survive with nothing but an Altoids tin.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot to take in, right?
It's very overwhelming.
Yeah, and that's why we're here.
That's right.
We're going to be your guides. We're going to trek through these posts with you and give you like the need to know practical survival tips so you can make it out of the woods and back to civilization in one piece.
Exactly. No zombies, no bunkers, just you, Mother Nature, and
Maybe a rogue squirrel or two.
a rogue squirrel or two. That's right.
Speaking of Mother Nature, let's talk about water. One listener wrote in, which seems to echo a lot of what people on the subreddit are wondering, and it's how do you find clean, safe drinking water when you're out in the wild? What about those life straws that everyone's talking about? Those seem to be a pretty hot topic. Are they all they're cracked up to be?
Those are really great questions, and we have seen them come up quite a bit in the subreddit.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to water, one of the best pieces of advice you can actually take is what you do before you even get into a survival situation.
Okay, so you're saying before I even think I might be lost in the woods.
That's right. There's that survival school saying, right? The best place to store water is inside you.
Okay, so you're telling me to stay hydrated. I mean, it seems obvious,
It does, right?
but it's probably something a lot of people don't really think about.
It's easy to overlook.
Yeah.
But being dehydrated can really impair your judgment.
Oh, for sure.
It drains your energy, and when you're already in a stressful situation, it's only going to make it that much worse and that much more dangerous.
Imagine trying to make a decision that's really important, like about your shelter or about which way you need to go when you're already like lightheaded and dizzy. That's not going to turn out well.
No, not at all.
So let's say, like, worst case scenario happens, you didn't hydrate like you should have and you need to find water.
Right.
Do those life straws really work? Like, are they really going to save my life?
So life straws are great. They really can be lifesavers. That's not an exaggeration. But they're good at filtering out bacteria,
Okay.
which is great, but they don't remove viruses.
And what about, there was a post, I think, about radiation contamination.
Right, that's another thing. And actually, someone asked about purifying water from a dehumidifier,
Really?
which we definitely don't recommend.
Okay, good to know.
But it brings up a really good point, right? Situational awareness is key.
Right, because a life straw in the desert is great. A life straw, if you're worried about industrial runoff, maybe not so much.
Exactly. So knowing the dangers that you're facing, that's just as important as having the tool itself.
So we've covered water. Let's talk about another hot topic that we saw in the subreddit, which is gear.
Okay?
Knives, axes, ponchos. Everyone seems to have an opinion about what you absolutely need to survive out in the wilderness.
For sure, yeah.
I gotta say, I always get a little excited going through like the gear recommendations. It's like,
Right.
it's like window shopping for your inner bear grills or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's so many opinions too. Like, where do you even begin?
Yeah, you can get lost in the gear, for sure.
Yeah.
But one thing that always rises to the top, no matter what, you gotta have a good knife.
That seems to be the one thing everyone agrees on. Like, no matter what, you need a knife.
It's the essential.
What makes a good knife, though? Like, what should we be looking for if we're really thinking about wilderness survival?
Durability, for sure, and then versatility.
Okay.
You need something that can obviously cut, but that can also handle, like, batoning wood, if you need to process some wood for fire or for shelter.
Okay.
Maybe do a little prying if you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
So, those hollow handle survival knives you always see?
Oh, yeah, with like the compass and the matches and everything.
Right, exactly. And those are cool, but they sacrifice having like a really strong blade for all that extra stuff. And let's be honest.
Yeah.
How reliable is a compass that's been rattling around inside of a knife handle anyway?
Yeah. Not great, probably.
Probably not. So
You're going to want a real compass for that.
a real compass for sure.
Another big debate, hatchet versus axe. We saw a few people mentioning the Pacific Northwest specifically. Does location actually play a role in what kind of chopping tool you should bring with you?
It does. Yeah. I mean, location's huge. The Pacific Northwest, you're dealing with like really dense forest. You've got bigger trees potentially.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So a smaller axe might actually be a better choice than just a hatchet if you need to process larger pieces of firewood Or if you want to build a really solid shelter, a hatchet might not be enough.
So it's really about working smarter, not harder,
Okay.
even when it comes to survival.
It is.
Can't talk about gear without talking about this, the Altoids Tin Survival Kit.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Is that legit, or is that just people being like, look how small I can make this?
Yeah, I mean, I love it for the ingenuity. It really makes you think about, like, what's important?
Yeah.
What do I absolutely need to survive
Right.
if I can only fit it in this tiny little Altoids tin?
Bare minimum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as a fun challenge, as a way to kind of get into that minimalist mindset,
Yeah.
great. But I don't know if I would stake my life on an Altoids tin survival kit.
Maybe not your whole life.
Yeah.
But speaking of preparedness, there was something else that came up a lot in this subreddit, and it's that human element, right?
Yeah.
We had one listener write in and say, okay, I've got my gear, now what? It's like they reached the now what stage of wilderness survival.
Yeah, that's a good point because, like we've been talking about, the gear is essential, but it's only part of it. And this came up a lot in this subreddit.
Yeah.
Knowledge and skills are so important, right?
Oh, yeah.
Knowing how to use that gear, knowing how to build a fire, knowing how to find your way, and honestly, how to stay calm under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that are going to make the difference between, like, a challenging experience and a disastrous one.
Yeah, and that's where those cautionary tales we see, like that one about the hiker who got lost in the North Cascades for a month.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that one really gets you.
That one stuck with me, too.
Yeah.
It just shows how important it is to be prepared, and not just with gear, but, like, mentally, too.
Right.
And the thing is, this wasn't just some, like, novice hiker. He was experienced,
Oh, wow.
but he just had this history of not really adequately preparing for his hikes. And unfortunately, in this case, it caught up with him.
Wow, that's a good reminder that experience doesn't always equal preparedness. Even if you're a seasoned adventurer, you can still fall into bad habits or just like underestimate the risks.
Totally.
Speaking of underestimating the risks, there was that funny one about scent control.
Oh, right. Yes.
If you had to live in the wilderness for like 10 years, would you still smell?
Could you do it? Yeah.
It seems a little silly compared to like, finding food and shelter.
Right.
But I imagine hygiene is important for more than just making friends out in the woods.
That's true. Yeah. If you let your hygiene go, you could end up with infections. You could have skin irritations.
Right.
And when you're in a survival situation, those things can go downhill really quickly. So yeah, even if there's no one around to complain about your BO, staying clean is important for your health.
Yeah, that's true. And we can't forget about that thread about surviving a plane crash.
Yeah. Really makes you think twice about complaining about the airline food.
Right. Like, is that extra bag of peanuts really worth it? But seriously, what's the consensus there? What do the, I guess, experts on the subreddit say to do if you're in that situation?
Yeah, they bring up the rule of threes a lot.
Okay, so air, shelter, water, the things we can't live without for very long.
Yeah, exactly. And it just highlights how important those basic needs are and how if you don't meet those needs, things can go downhill pretty quickly, especially in like a plane crash situation in a remote area.
Yeah.
And I think the prevailing wisdom there is to stay put.
Really? Why is that? You would think you'd want to like get as far away from the crash site as possible.
Right. Well, for one, the wreckage can actually provide you with some shelter,
Oh,
some
okay.
protection from the elements. And it's a lot easier for rescuers to find you if you stay put.
That makes sense. So as counterintuitive as it seems to just like stay with the plane,
Right.
that's actually probably the best thing you can do.
It is. Yeah, every situation is going to be unique, of course.
Of course.
You always have to think critically about your situation and make the best decision you can.
Right.
But that seems to be the general consensus.
Okay, and that goes back to what we were saying about learning from the pros.
Right.
I mean, I don't just mean like watching Bear Grylls, although that is fun to do.
Always entertaining.
Right. But like, there's a question about survival school.
Oh, yeah. Is it worth it?
Yeah, is it worth it? And it seems like there's such a range on the subreddit. There are people who are just like dipping their toes in the water, and there are people who sound like they teach survival school on the weekends,
Exactly.
It's a very big range.
Yeah, you're right.
So for those people who are just thinking about it, do you think it's a good idea?
I mean, I think formal training is always going to be valuable
Yeah.
because it gives you a chance to learn those skills in a safe and controlled environment.
Right. Like, I'm sure there's a big difference between reading about how to build a fire and actually building a fire.
100%. Yeah, hands-on experience is really important.
Yeah.
But that said, there's so much knowledge you can get from online communities like this subreddit.
Right. Like we said, it can be overwhelming, but it's a really valuable tool. And just reading through these posts with you, I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. And that's the beauty of the internet, right?
Yeah.
You can find all this detailed information. You can read reviews about gear.
Yeah.
You can connect with, like, really experienced survivalists from all over the world.
But you got to be careful, too, because just because someone posts it on the internet doesn't mean it's good
Oh,
advice.
absolutely. You always have to approach online information with a healthy dose of skepticism and use some common sense.
Yeah. Trust but verify, as they say.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, there was that one post where someone got called out for, like, giving really bad advice.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And, like, the community shut it down so fast.
Yeah, it was great. It was like they were policing their own,
Exactly.
which I think is good.
Yeah, it just shows that you have to be careful. You have to use your head.
Always.
So we've talked about the importance of water, essential and not so essential gear,
Right.
the human element, which is so important.
For sure.
There was one more thing, that post asking for true survival stories.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting.
Like, not just the tips and tricks, but like, tell us what happened. Have you ever had to use these skills? And it got me thinking,
Yeah.
what would our stories be? Like, if we were out there, what would we do? You, with your incredible ability to analyze information and connect the dots.
That definitely comes in handy.
Right. It just goes to show that preparedness isn't just about the gear and knowing how to build a fire. It's about your mindset.
Yeah, your ability to adapt and improvise and stay resourceful when things go wrong.
Yeah. And things are going to go wrong.
Oh, 100% they will.
That's almost guaranteed.
Right. And knowing where to find the right information, which is what we've done today by going through this subreddit.
Exactly.
That's a huge part of it.
It is. So to our listeners out there, if you want to learn more, we encourage you to check out the Wilderness Survival subreddit, responsibly, of course.
Yes.
And maybe your story will be the one inspiring others someday.
That's a great thought.
It is. Thanks for diving deep with us today, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Until next time, stay curious, stay prepared, and most importantly, stay safe out there.